almost committed suicide 3 years ago, but I did not jump. I'm better now. What would you tell someone who might currently be on the edge?
Well, it's hard to come up with generic advice for someone who's desperate, because there's many pathways to desperation. You can always do it tomorrow. Yeah, well, that's pretty good. It's pretty good. That's a pretty good piece of advice. It's like, you don't get to do it twice if you're successful. So is it not possible just to wait? Can you just wait? And that's pretty generic advice, but it's definitely worth thinking about, because it's final act. Then I would say too, let people around you know. You don't want to keep that a secret. And if you don't have anyone to tell, really it's time to go to the hospital and tell someone. And when you go to the hospital, you say, I'm suicidal. And I have a plan, and here's my plan. And that's, by the way, how you assess someone for suicidality, Because depressed people, lots of people get depressed, will have suicidal thoughts, and they're far from rare. And so then you might ask yourself, well, how do you know when someone's suicidal? And they're suicidal when they say to you, you say, well, do you ever think self-destructive thoughts? And they say, yeah, in my father's house, there's a basement and there's a pistol down there, and it's in the top right-hand corner of the bureau, and I know the bullets for that gun are in the bottom left-hand drawer, and I've taken that gun out of that drawer and I've toyed with it, and I thought, my parents are leaving next week for a weekend, and they won't be back, and I could go into the bathroom and put the barrel in my mouth and end it. It's like, that's a suicidal person. And you know that because they're not just being plagued by vague thoughts. They have a fully detailed, implementable vision of their death, and that's not good. And so if there's anybody in the audience who has that sort of fully fleshed out fantasy, I would say, tell someone, or more than one person. Tell the closest person you have to someone who cares, and if you don't have anybody to tell, then go to the hospital and tell them, because the probability is pretty high if you're suicidal that there's actually something wrong with you, that you're ill in some manner. And maybe you're depressed, but there's a lot of reasons to be depressed. Sometimes you might be depressed because you just have a terrible life, and that's very complicated. But sometimes you're depressed because you have an immunological condition, an inflammatory condition, or you're ill in some way that hasn't been diagnosed, or you have seasonal affective disorder and your circadian rhythms are off. Like, there's a lot of reasons that you can get desperate enough to be suicidally depressed, and there's always the possibility that can be fixed. And it's tricky, because when you're depressed, you definitely think that the future is dismal, and the past is dismal, and the present is unbearable, and the future is definitely worse, and it's all your fault besides. And that's basically the depressive cloud. It affects everything. It's very low level, profound, deep brain and psychic state. But it's generally rectifiable, and since you can always do it tomorrow, you might as well run the whole gamut of treatments before you make the final decision. So that's what I would tell people who are... Oh, and the other thing too, you got to understand too about suicide is that if there are people around you that love you, it's pretty likely that they'll never really recover. And so, you might be thinking that if you took yourself out, you'd be doing the people around you a favor, and often people who are depressed, they really believe that. But, I've had lots of clients who were pretty damn traumatized by a familial suicide, and they just torture themselves for the rest of their life thinking, what if, I had one client, for example, her relative committed suicide an hour after she missed a phone call from him. It's like, how the hell do you recover from that, Because you just think, if I would have just been there, and then you can't talk to the person about it. There's no real way of rectifying that. You just live with that guilt, and it's it's a pretty damn awful thing. That's why most societies regard suicide as a crime, you know, because you leave an aftermath of catastrophic destruction in your wake. And that's also not a good thing. So, you know, if you're depressed, you're going to think it's going to be better for everyone else if you're just gone. But generally, that's far from the truth. Almost inevitably, it's far from the truth. So those are some things you need to know on the suicide analysis and prevention front.
Your life is your life. Don't let it be clubbed into dank submission. Be on the watch. There are ways out. There is light somewhere. It may not be much light, but it beats the darkness. Be on the watch. The gods will offer you chances. Know them and take them. You can't beat death, but you can beat death in life. Sometimes the more often you learn to do it, the more light there will be. Your life is your life. Know it while you have it. Gods wait to delight in you.
You can always do it tomorrow.